Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. If you are watching live, thank you so much for joining me for the next half an hour or so talking about one of my favorite things. Today's live chat, I'm going to share some common ruler frustrations, those common things that happen when you're learning how to quilt with rulers, and giving some possible solutions for them as well. I'm also going to tease a little bit about what's coming up next year, kind of show a little bit of to be continued kind of stuff. And of course, if you're watching live, Jessica is behind the camera as always, monitoring live chat. So if you have any questions, be sure to type them in the comments and she'll hand them to me at the end. So I'm super excited about that. Sorry I missed you all last week. Wasn't feeling super great, but I'm back this week and excited to talk about quilting. Real quick, my next live chat is not going to be until next year. Isn't that crazy? So January 8th, obviously, with next week being Christmas. By the way, how is that even possible? Like, I know everybody says that, like it comes so fast, but it does. It kind of like breaks my brain a little bit. But and then with New Year's, so kind of excited to spend the last live chat of the year with you all talking about some fun stuff. So first of all, coming up next year. So I feel like in this kind of work, we're always thinking to the next project and what's going on. So we did Christmas back in November with the Season's Greetings video series, and I've been focusing on January since. But that's when our arcs, curves, and points with rulers free motion challenge quilting along is starting. So I've been talking about this for a while. If you've watched any of my live chats, you can probably do this next part for me. But we're going to be doing that video series where we're learning how to use those types of rulers to learn some designs and work through a quilt. I'm super excited about that. So January is going to be a lot of fun in that regard. So again, that's starting in January 13th, and we're going to be using these types of rulers to quilt some pretty cool designs. So that's kind of been on my brain right now, but we're going to be starting. That's going to be a lot of fun. Now, one question that usually comes up when I talk about my free motion challenge quilting along video series is, like when, do I have to watch it right at the same time? Even if you're like, I'm not mentally ready for this, I want to start in February, you can. The videos will be available indefinitely. So no pressure, no pressure here. So I don't want you feeling like, oh my gosh, I got to get everything ready. But other things are happening next year too. So we've got Build a Quilt getting ready to start in January. So that is our Block of the Month program. I kind of talked about it, I think about a month ago in my live chat. So that's starting in January. It's not too late to sign up if you want to register. So it's kind of a lot of fun. It's like the opposite of the free motion challenge quilting along. That's all machine quilting, and this is all piecing, and it's a lot of fun. It's like a block of the month, but better is kind of what I like to joke about. It's 10 blocks with 3 different color options. So you can visit Quilting is My Therapy to hear all those details, but it's a lot of fun. So if you're wanting to build a quilt, you can definitely do that. Also, next year, new episodes of The Midnight Quilter are coming. So I've already been kind of filming, working on that. I'm excited to spend some time making a quilt, drinking my wine, and quilting along with you in The Midnight Quilter. So I pulled a couple of the projects just to show you like, ooh, what's coming down the pipe. But we're going to be doing a little heart wall hanging where you'll see me put it together and quilt it with a little bit of secondary designs in the quilting. Super excited about that. Also, we're going to be showing off some 30-degree triangles. I'll be showing you how to piece those together. That was a fun learning curve for me. And we're going to make the really cool quilt. This is actually one of the versions. The other version is like bright and fun. So excited about that. And even some thread painting. So a lot of stuff kind of in the pipeline, getting ready to come out. And I'm so excited to go over it all with you. Now, I know not everybody lives in the Kansas City area, but if you do, or you find yourself coming through the area, we have a lot of upcoming events, so you should check the website out and see those. I have long arm classes, we have retreats, we have a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of different kinds of events. So again, I know not everybody lives in the area, but if you are, you're like, I think I might want to do that. And then please save the date for Quilt Walk. If you're like, oh, I want to schedule a summer vacation, June 6th is a great time. You can pass on through and participate in our annual quilt walk. So there'll be more details about that as we get closer, but definitely a lot of fun. This is the time of year I think everybody kind of looks ahead and kind of doesn't plan out the whole year, but it's kind of fun to like look ahead and think, wow, what's 2026 going to hold for us? And super excited about that. Anyway, so that's kind of what's coming up. Of course, lots of fun stuff. And as always, I'll be doing my live chats on Thursdays. So this is definitely going to be something that I'll be doing for indefinitely. As long as you all are going to listen to me, I'm going to talk about quilting because I love getting to do this. Okay, with the Free Motion Challenge quilting along starting in January, we're going to be focusing on machine quilting with rulers. And these videos are meant for any skill level, any machine. I show kind of more basic kind of beginner designs, but I also give a lot of variations and other ways that you can quilt. But before we get to the videos, I thought leading up to it might be nice to have a little bit more instruction. So recently on my YouTube channel, I had the basics of quilting with arc rulers on a long arm, the basics of quilting on a sewing machine. And in this live chat, I just want to share common ruler frustrations, because I have taught enough classes over the years that when you're learning how to quilt with rulers, there are these things that come up, and it's just part of the learning process, right? It's part of the learning curve. But I do have suggestions that will hopefully make it easier. I will say the short answer is that it just takes practice. In fact, most of the frustrations that someone might encounter will work themselves out the more that you quilt with rulers. But I get it, because it can be super frustrating to keep at it when you feel like you're struggling. So if you're like, I didn't know I was supposed to worry about anything, don't worry about it. But if you're like, oh, I might have some questions here. So first of all, when we're quilting with rulers, and we're going to see how to use these to make really cool designs, I would say the number one common frustration is the ruler slips or moves while you're quilting, right? And that's whether you're on a sewing machine or a long arm. The idea of the ruler is to act kind of like a template or a guide for you to follow along to create these designs. And if that ruler is not staying where it needs to stay, that can be very difficult, right? So first of all, checking your hand position. So if I were to hold my ruler here, when I'm placing my hand where I want the ruler to go, I need to make sure that my fingertips are kind of close to the edge. Now, I talk about that in that video on my YouTube channel, but sometimes we get so scared we hold it over here and like it kind of comes up. So make sure you're holding it correctly, that you have control of your ruler. Another thing that will help you is getting some kind of grip for the back of your rulers, especially when you're starting out. So my Creative Grids rulers already has grip on it. It's kind of it's a lighter grip. It's not super tacky, but if you need more to help hold that in place, then you can add some other tape to the back. So like Handy Grip or True Grip would be a great option there as well. Another thing that's super important, and not just for the ruler moving around, is I want to make sure that the ruler foot is in between my fingertips as I'm quilting. This is so important because especially if I'm working with longer rulers, if my hand is down here and my foot is up here, I'm not going to have control, and that ruler is definitely going to slip and move around. So really having the proper hand placement is super key when it comes to controlling the movement of that. Now, especially in the beginning, I'm sure it can feel almost like it's moving on its own, or it's just kind of like feels awkward, but the more you practice, the easier it will definitely get. Another thing is to have consistent pressure. So this is something I'll talk about here in a second, but when I'm pressing down on this ruler, I want to make sure that if I'm on a sewing machine, I'm pressing down and then moving the quilt this way. If I don't have a good down grip on it, or if I'm not pressing down enough, it's going to just move to the side instead of pressing down. So that's also going to help as well. Another thing that could help for sewing machines specifically is when you're sitting at your machine, make sure that you're high enough that you can push down on your quilt and your ruler at the same time. Sometimes what happens, especially if we're like at a classroom setting, we're not at our home setting, I might be too low and my arms will be like this. It's too hard to push and move that way. So try sitting higher, either getting adjustable height on your chair or sitting on a pillow or something so you can push down, and that will let you use gravity to your benefit there as well. So again, that ruler moving is going to come with practice. Put some grip on the back and just focus on your hand positioning. When you're starting, especially, take your time, kind of play with different hand positions. Pause while you're quilting. You don't have to quilt along the whole ruler without stopping. And that's especially important when we're working with curves and things like that, because sometimes we think, oh, we need to keep on going, but we don't. We can stop, reposition our hands, have that control, and continue on. And again, that just comes with practice. Don't you love it? You're like going to take this whole video series and I could just say practice, but I promise it definitely gets easier and the more you go on with it. All right, this one is not quite as common, but it is something I hear a lot, uneven or skipped stitches when quilting with rulers. Now, there's a couple different reasons for this. First of all, let's talk about the skipped stitches. If you're quilting on your sewing machine and you have your ruler foot, sometimes switching out the foot to a different one than you normally use will give you some skip stitches, and that can be because the foot is too high. Now, one thing that some feet have, you can't really see this, I'll have to post a picture, but it's an adjustable height foot. So if my foot is too high, I'm going to get skip stitches, and this is the case whether you're using a ruler or not. So I need to adjust that height so that it's low enough that I'm not getting skip stitches, but it's, not too low that it's hard to push the fabric through. Another way that can kind of manifest itself, and this is something that happens to me, especially when I'm quilting on a sewing machine. When I stop quilting, right, to reposition my hands or to drink my piecing potion, whatever the case may be, If there's, if the quilt is pulling on that needle a little bit, let's say it's hanging down a bit, when I go to start quilting, that needle comes up, that quilt's gonna slip a little bit, and then the needle will come down and start quilting. So make sure if you pause and you're quilting on your sewing machine that you just make sure that the quilt is not pulling on that needle. And you'll know it's pulling if you see like a crease or a wrinkle to the side. You can tell it's actively pulling on that. So that will give you a skip stitch every time you begin quilting again. Is it the end of the world? No, definitely not. And if you're like, I'm not even worried about that, don't worry about it. We just call it organic stitch length. But that definitely can happen as you're pausing. Now, the uneven or irregular stitches, that really, whether you're on a sewing machine or long arm, that really can show up when you're repositioning the ruler and beginning, right? You're quilting along the ruler, you're pausing, you're repositioning, you're continuing on. So you're kind of starting and stopping and starting and stopping. So that means that maybe as you're easing in and out of that start and stop, you're getting some stitches that are close together and some that are further apart. Again, that's going to come with practice and consistency. Is it ever going to be perfect? Probably not. I mean, if you were to look really close at some of my quilts, you'll see where I've started and stopped. But the idea is to get it, somewhat consistent. So just knowing, adjusting the speed of your machine might be a little bit helpful with that. So again, skipped and uneven stitches, check your ruler foot and make sure that the speed is right for what you're working on. All right, this is for you guys that are quilting on a sewing machine. So difficulty moving the quilt. Okay, so let's say you get the challenge panel, you're gonna quilt along with me, you start quilting with rulers and you feel like you cannot move that quilt. There's a couple things about this. First of all, if you have an extension table, get it out. It's gonna be a lot more helpful. It's gonna give you a platform for your ruler, but also keeps the quilt kind of up. Whether you're free motion quilting or with or without a ruler, we don't want the quilt hanging down at all. Any bit of gravity on that quilt is going to kind of pull it and make it harder for you to move it. So when I'm pausing, and you don't ever see this in the videos because I cut it out, but I'm like making sure the quilt is pulled up. I'm making sure it's not hanging down the side. It's the shove and stuff, right? I'm going to have it kind of rolled up. That's going to make it a little bit easier to move. Focusing on the section that you're in, super important too, right? I know sometimes like I want to quilt really long lines, but I need to reposition my hands so that I have true control. But I will say for me personally, the hardest part here is when I'm holding that ruler, I need to make sure I put my other hand on the quilt too, right? Even though one hand has a ruler, I want both of my hands on that quilt. And so sometimes what can happen is this hand that doesn't have the ruler might push harder or better than the other one. So I need to make sure I'm pausing and repositioning my hands often. This is super important. I think since I learned how to quilt, machine quilt on a long arm first, where I never had to pause and reposition my hands, that's probably one of my worst habits when I quilt on a sewing machine. It's funny because I'm always like, you have your most control when your hands are on either side of that needle, but I never want to stop. So pretty soon, like my elbows are by the needle. So reposition your hands often. That's definitely gonna help you out. So again, push and move and reposition your hands a lot. That's gonna be the trick. Now, on the other side of that, if you're quilting on your long arm and it's hard to move, the problem here is you're pushing too hard on the ruler. This is one of the trickier things to teach because it's kind of like teaching somebody how to drive a manual car, right? Finding that sweet spot. When you're quilting on a long arm, you need to hold that ruler, you need to push it down with enough pressure that you have control of the ruler, but not so much pressure that the machine won't move. So if I have a ruler base, which you should if you're quilting, it's underneath my quilt. And if my ruler is on top of it, pushing there, if I'm pushing down really hard, I'm actually preventing the long arm from moving, and then I'm trying to push the long arm harder, and it's just really difficult. So as you're quilting, try to find that firm pressure, but not pushing down too hard. Don't you like that? Is that appropriately vague? It's like, okay, that's really helpful, Angela. Your hand should not hurt. You don't need to put a lot of pressure on that ruler to control the machine. That machine wants to go every which way. So I just need it to kind of be a little stopgap, a little like boundary. So try that and see if that helps. I will say, in general, for those of you out there that are more perfectionistic, I'm sure there's a few of you out there, sometimes that can get in our way. When you're quilting, especially with rulers, you're like, I want it to be perfect. I'm gonna hold it the best and I'm gonna push the hardest. And actually it can result in worse quilting. So try to relax, try to have a good grip, but just know that you can't push too hard on that long arm. All right, how about this? When you're quilting, if you get gaps or puckering in the quilting. So again, this kind of goes with the even stitching. As you're learning, you want to learn how to quilt consistently, right? Moving smoothly through those curves, especially as we start working with the curved rulers, because we're talking about changing that point of contact on the foot. So again, practicing trying to keep your quilting consistent. And if you're on a sewing machine, keeping that quilt up. So this kind of goes along with, what we've already talked about, but those puckers or those gaps are coming from inconsistent quilting. So on a sewing machine, and it's so hard because I want to come to each of your houses and show you exactly how to do this, but I will say that in general, from my experience, most quilters quilt too slow. So what's happening is that needle is stuck in the quilt and you're trying to move the quilt too fast, but the needle's moving too slow, and that's going to give you those pucks and gathering. Again, it will work itself out with practice. So if you see some, just call it ruching, call it embellishment, and move on, but just know that's just kind of where that's coming from. Not the end of the world for sure. All right, the last one, and then I will take your questions, so hopefully put them in the comment section. Quilting off the ruler. The first one was the most common, this one's probably the second most common. So let's say I'm quilting on my curve, I got my smiley ruler, and I'm like, I'm gonna quilt along it, and then I go off of it. Totally normal, totally common. When we're quilting along the rulers, and we're gonna see this in the video series, I really need to be aware of the point of contact between my foot of my machine, this is my foot, and the ruler. So as I'm on the top of the curve, I'm gonna be hitting here, but over here, I might be hitting the side of my foot. As you're quilting, just be aware, be mindful of where the foot is supposed to touch the ruler, right? And as you quilt, keeping that in mind will help you pull the machine or push it into the ruler. I wanna maintain that contact. Again, not pushing too hard into the machine, but keeping that contact there, and that will come with practice. But as you're quilting, just think, okay, where is it supposed to touch? Focus on that, and it'll be fine. I will say, in general, the reason when I teach ruler quilting classes, I always start with a straight edge ruler because that point of contact is the same no matter where I am on the ruler. So it's one less thing to think about. But in this video series, we're kind of going past that, and we're going to do some arcs and curves. And so as I go around them, I really need to be kind of aware of that. So again, that's going to come with practice. Try not to stress out too much about that. And especially the more curved, the more extreme the curve of the ruler, the more you have to really be aware of that. But again, it comes with practice for sure. And I'm super excited to spend that video series going over some really cool designs and different ways to use your ruler. I'm not only going to just show you oh, here's 20 arc designs, but I'm going to show you how to take that ruler and use it in blocks that are too big or too small. How do I adapt it to fit those areas so they can be versatile and used in a lot of ways? So if you are going to be quilting along with me, which I hope you are, because we're going to have so much fun, get your ruler foot out, get a little bit of practice in there, see how it's feeling. That way, when it does start, you have questions, you can join my live chat and ask me live. All right, so besides that, I'll take any questions if there were any. I know we're kind of getting into Christmas. You might be like, I can't even think about ruler quilting right now. I'm trying to focus on whatever. But there were a couple questions that came up in the type chat. Teresa said, Teresa or Teresa, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. She said, since I'm talking about ruler frustrations, what was the most frustrating thing that I've endured with quilting, or my worst frustration I've had? And I'm like, I really kind of thought about that. I've not had one major thing. I mean, in the moment, everything seems like the worst frustration, especially when I started out, the tension or the thread breaking, but you get past it and you realize it's not too bad. So I would say probably the worst frustration I've had is, breaking a ruler, quilting, over the ruler and breaking the needle, because that's always freaks you out a little bit. But I'm going to think if I come up with a better answer to that, I'll have to talk about that next live chat. And then Leah brought up how to clean rulers. Now this is more, I think, for long arm quilting. When I'm quilting on my long arm, sometimes the edge of my ruler will get a black residue. And I don't know if that's from the friction between the foot or what that is. I just wipe it off with rubbing alcohol, or sometimes I just take it to the pole and just kind of wipe it on the batting. I think rubbing alcohol is great. I've used that, but some of the concerns was maybe it might be too abrasive for the marked lines, but I've not had a problem with that. So hopefully that will help out. All right. What are good substitutions for the smiley and dot rulers? I need low shank. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is so much fun. So Shelly or smiley and dot, basically we're looking for arced rulers and some kind of straight edge ruler. So even if you don't have smiley, any kind of arced ruler will work, because I'm going to show you how to use the ruler in different size shapes. So you're going to learn how to use that no matter what shape you have. So look for a good arc ruler that's low shank. And then for dot, we're going to be using, I wish I'd had one right here, but using the inside to create this kind of pointy, curvy shape. But in the video, I'll show you how to do that with a straight edge ruler. So if you have, just get an arc ruler and a straight edge ruler and you'll be set. And if you're like, oh, what about a third one? If you want to get a clamshell or a half circle ruler, that'd be great. So arc ruler is the most important. Dot or straight edge will be great, and then clamshell ruler if you can. Just curious, what time do you film the Midnight Quilter? Is it at midnight? Winky face, LOL. It depends on if you want the illusion, right? It's like if somebody asks, is Santa Claus real? You're like, do you want to have the illusion or the truth? So if you want the illusion, I quilt at midnight, I'm drinking wine, it's a good old time. In reality, the older I get, the earlier I have to go to bed. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but when I was younger, my kids were younger, I would quilt till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because that was like my only quilting time. And now I'm like, oh, it's 9:30, it's time for me to go to bed. So I might have to start calling it the mid-afternoon quilter. But the idea is still the same, whenever I can carve time out for myself and quilt. But I actually quilt in my studio at our event space, so I don't quilt at home. And so I'm usually here during the day. So usually the filming happens between 10 and 3-ish, around there, so in the afternoon. And then I'm not even drinking wine because it's too early. But I do drink when I get home. I make up for it when I get home. So hopefully that helps. Do people usually leave the panel on the long arm the whole time for the challenge? Now, in January, the next live chat, I'll be talking about, okay, how to participate in this video series. How are you going to quilt along with me? And the number one question for me too is like, if I'm working on a long arm and this is a 4-video series, like I can't have my long arm frame taken up for that. So I'm going to talk about how we're going to work our way through it, where we're going to start and all that stuff. If I were participating as a quilter with my long arm, I would probably wait to the end, watch all the videos, and then quilt it at one time. Now, if you're like, but I want to quilt along with you, well, you can put it on and take it off too, week by week if you want. I wish there was a better option for that, but that's kind of where we're at. So that's kind of how that goes. Now, as far as other people, I don't know. Some quilters, some long armers might be like, I just leave it on. It takes me that long to get it done. So I don't know, leave that in the comment section if you're watching and if you're listening and you have a long arm. Let me know what you do. It's kind of interesting to see what we have. Why aren't low shake options in all of your rulers? Because I like to be the Grinch and make everybody's life miserable. No, I'm just kidding. The rulers I have with Creative Grids are made, they make them, and I've designed them and they make them. That's how I get to use their markings and all that fun stuff. We've decided together that low shank isn't really a viable option. I know that people need the low shank, but I think for what it costs to do and the numbers, it just doesn't make sense. And so they didn't want to. So I'm really sorry about that. I know for those of you on a low shank sewing machine, it can be a little bit of a struggle. So I'm sorry that that's not working out. All right. How can I make the ruler not squeak when it's next to the ruler foot? Okay. This kind of makes me feel better because sometimes I'm like, is it just me? Especially on a long arm, I'll get to quilting and it makes a squeaky sound. Oh, high squeaky sound. National Lampoon's reference there. Okay, great. So it's not just me. That's good. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it has something to do with the way I'm holding it. I think it's moving a little bit and it's just the friction of the foot next to the ruler is creating that sound. Because I feel like it happens more when I'm working on curves than it doesn't really happen on straight. So I think that might be it. I've not had that happen to me on a sewing machine, but definitely on a long arm, and it's a little like, what is that sound? It kind of sounds scary. So I'm guessing it's from not holding the ruler still, and it's moving slightly, and the foot is moving at the same time. But I'm not 100% sure on that. If you do have the answer to that, leave that in the comments, because I'd like to know what the answer to that is. All right, you all, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I've had an amazing year, going through the live chats and all this stuff. I'm looking forward to next year and all the fun stuff, and I hope you'll join me for some more live chats then. If you're not watching live and you have a question, no problem, leave it in the comments. I get on there from time to time to answer, and quilters are pretty great to help out too. So I hope everybody has a happy and safe holidays, a great new year, and I will see you next year for the next live chat. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.